I'll never help a stranger at night ever again. For purposes, I'm using a throwaway account and will use a fake name. This happened a few days ago whilst I was on my way home from visiting my friend's house. I was driving on a back road in my Tesla Model 3 while it was on auto drive. I'll admit that I was not paying attention to the road and I was on my phone while I had my music in the car playing. The ride was okay and chill for a while, but I'm not really sure because I was not paying attention to the time. Out of nowhere, my car immediately braked and made an alarming sound. I was scared shitless and immediately took control of the wheel and looked through the windshield. When I looked, I saw a figure standing inches from my car, barely avoiding being hit. My heart was racing from the impact and now seeing what I could only assume to be a person. They didn't even flinch from the sight of almost being hit. I looked at them for a good 10 seconds before I put my car in park and turned on the megaphone to ask them, are they okay? They didn't respond and proceeded to walk near my window. I locked my doors while they were approaching because I was terrified. They asked me if I could roll the window down to speak to them, but I refused and told them that I could hear them from the other side. I then asked why were they out here all alone in the cold, and they told me that their car had broken down and that they were hoping someone would stop to help them. As they were talking, I got a good look at their face and they appeared to be 25 minus 30. They also asked me my name and I told them my name was Rebecca. They told me their name was Ashton. After that small talk they attempted, I told them that I would be calling someone to come assist them with their situation. They weren't happy with that and insisted that I drop them off to a friend's house who lived nearby. That's when I become really freaked out and suspicious. They had told me they were waiting for someone, and now they need to be dropped off. I then put my car back into drive and told them again that I would call someone to come help them. They then tried to reach for the door handle, but I guess they forgot that Tesla handles are embedded into the car. When they did that, I immediately stepped on the pedal and went flying down the road. I didn't even look into my rear view mirror or put the car back into autopilot. The whole ride back I was scared shitless. I got back into a main road where I would hope to see cars and just floored at home. I couldn't get my mind off of it for the rest of the night. I have suspicions that that guy was not alone and that there was other people with them. I pray that they didn't get someone else who wasn't as lucky as me. I will never in my life stop to help some random person ever again. If you can see this, it is very important that you keep reading. This is Colonel Jacob Wayne of the United States Air Force. If you're reading this right now, it is very important that you keep reading until the end. It should take 3 to 4 minutes, and it is extremely important that you read carefully and follow the instructions provided. Humor me if you must, but please don't look away until you've finished reading. Oh, and please try to stay calm. Any increase in your stress levels will draw their attention. Ergo, I won't go into detail as to how you got where you are. How you got here isn't as important as getting you out. Believe me when I say we are working on that right now. The best way to help yourself is to keep reading. Don't scan ahead. Don't read out loud. Just read. Right now, you're probably thinking back on the past few days and nothing felt out of the ordinary. You went about your regular daily activities with nothing unusual to report. That's because they are very good, so good most people don't even realize they're in the simulation. Even as our code works its way deeper into their program, they are monitoring you. So please, remain calm. It was tricky, but we found a way in to communicate directly with you. We had to embed this message into your daily routine so it didn't draw their attention. You're probably reading this on Reddit, TikTok, or some other social media site. Might even be in an email forward or a book, we don't know. We can't control how the message gets to you, we only know that you are receiving it. Subliminally, as your eyes are passing over these words, a code is being uploaded into your brain. Think of it as a computer virus, or in this case, an antivirus. Your brain is an organic computer, and they exploited that. They hacked right into your subconscious mind and overrode it with their simulation code. That's how they got in, and that's why everything appears normal. You might think that you're going about your daily life, but in reality you're strapped to a table with tubes sticking out of your body. Now that the code is uploading, you may begin to feel some sensations. For example, one ear might feel slightly warmer than the other. You might even feel an itch or tickle. Don't scratch, just let it be. Ignore the dull background hum you might hear as well. That's their program. If they catch on before our code has time to work, they will abort the simulation. If that happens, you will be lost to us forever. Oh, and don't be alarmed, but by now they realize we are in their system. You may notice some small changes, specifically a slight shortness of breath or that you have to control your breathing manually. This is normal. We know from other communication attempts that whenever they discover a code break-in, the first system they power down is the one controlling your breathing. Thankfully, even in the simulation you are capable of breathing manually. Try it. Breathe in, breathe out, inhale, exhale. Awesome. You're doing just fine. They've probably figured out there's a glitch, but if our code is working, we've disabled their ability to do a hard reboot. Because of this, they will try other methods to disrupt the upload. It is very important that you ignore anything that might draw your attention from these words. If they pull you away before the upload completes, it will delete our code. Block them out. Ignore the movements you see in your peripheral vision. Those sounds you hear, the voices, they aren't family, friends, or coworkers in need of attention. They may even try to use your pets. They know your weaknesses. Overlook the notifications popping up on your screen if you're on a phone or computer. Block them all out until you finish reading. It's just another way they'll try to break our communication link. Evidently, if our code is working, the next thing you'll notice is an overwhelming urge to swallow. You don't realize it, but there's a feeding tube down your throat. You'll only know it's there because your tongue won't rest comfortably in your mouth. You might also become hyper aware of the amount of saliva being produced. Don't overreact. If you have to swallow, just swallow. It's only weird if you make it weird. So, if you're still reading this, the code upload is about 90% complete. We've locked onto your location. You're doing great, but you're really going to need to focus now. Once the upload is complete, there will be instructions you will need to follow to exit the simulation. That is, if you've followed the instructions and haven't looked away. Complicating matters is the fact that they now know we're here, and they know what we're doing. Their attempts to divert your attention through the simulation proved unsuccessful, so now they're going to use your body's systems against you. They are in your brain. They want you to blink. Don't blink. Your life depends on keeping your eyes open. Almost there, just a few paragraphs more until the code upload is complete. Don't scan down or up, just keep reading. I got you this far. Stay with me. Eyes open, eyes front, keep them locked on the screen. Please focus. I don't want to lose you. I've lost so many already. Ignore it all. Block everything out. Ignore the tickle on your scalp and the itch on your arm. Don't give up now. You've made it this far. Fight it. You're almost there. Just follow the instructions below and we can get you out. Embedded in this text are the steps you need to follow to unplug from the simulation. If we did this correctly, the first letter of each paragraph will tell you what you need to do. Don't look yet. The upload still needs to finish. I hope you didn't look. Upload complete. We've done everything we can on this end. See you on the other side. I'm a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service. I have some stories to tell. I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been an SAR officer for a few years now, and along the way I've seen some things that I think you guys will be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff, and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old stay where you are thing, and they don't wander far. But I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing persons cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall and covered in hair, like a bear, and that he had a weird face. We searched that area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name, before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere, and we never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could possibly have gone, because neither her mother or grandpa saw her come down. A few times, I've been out on my own searching with a canine, and they've tried to lead me straight up cliffs. Not hills, not even rock faces. Straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling, and in those cases we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff, or miles away from where the canine has led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange. I was teamed up with another SAR officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevasse with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out, and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night, climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible muffled screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. I killed something invisible and I don't know what to do. For weeks, I knew I was being stalked. Everything I'd meticulously sorted by color had been sifted through and returned out of order, unwrinkled, but changed, and they felt different, like they'd been washed with the wrong detergent or touched with soapy hands. But it wasn't just that. There was a wrongness in my apartment. The floor creaked randomly. One day I found a large handprint on my mirror that hadn't been there when I left for work in the morning. There was an odor, too, one I'd only smelled at funeral homes before. Then one night I woke up to the feeling of hot breath in my face, like a dog was inches away, panting at me. I sat up and heard a thump and something landed on my floor. Go away, I screamed as footsteps retreated into the distance. I turned on all the lights and found the room empty, but I never did go back to sleep. The next morning, I stepped out of bed and felt a sharp pain in my foot. Looking down, I found a sharp, needle-like object embedded in the floor. I took it to the bathroom to look at it under stronger light and realized that the needle turned transparent when viewed from certain angles. I tried to look online, but I couldn't find anything like the needle. Then, in the middle of my next search, my router went out. The sounds mostly came at night, but then things started happening in the daytime too. A pair of my running sneakers disappeared right after a jog. And then, when I was showering, I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful." I screamed and screamed and screamed. The next morning, I bought a gun. The guy at the store, a bearded fatherly type, tried to sell me on a 9mm that looked like a toy, but I sprung for a Sig Sauer 365, complete with a 10+1 magazine. I hadn't gone shooting since my dad had taken me to the range back in my teens, so I figured I might need a few shots. That night, I slipped the gun under my pillow and went to sleep. I woke up to the feeling of someone stroking my bare shoulder. My hips felt pinned to the mattress. I cried out in panic and pushed up as hard as I could. I heard a grunt, and then something grabbed my wrists and pushed me down. I felt the wet of lips on mine. Then I swung my knee up and felt it collide with something soft. I heard a groan, and then something thumped on the hardwood beside the bed. I reached over, grabbed my gun, and shot at the groan until my clip was half empty. There was a hacking cough, and then a voice begging, "Wait, please, don't, I love you." I emptied the rest of the clip and the voice was gone. There's a warm wet pool on my bedroom floor now. I've been trying to mop it up, but it's hard because there's nothing to see. Then there's the invisible thing. It's a little bigger than me, and I'm not sure how I'll possibly lift it. A few minutes ago, as I was looking for my mop in the garage, another strange thing happened. My front door slowly opened and closed. I heard a few sets of footsteps enter. They walked to my bedroom. Since then, I've been hearing the sound of tape unrolling and bottles spraying. They're cleaning up, I realized. But what I don't yet know is if I'm part of the mess. Rules for using pixelchat.com. Thank you for picking pixelchat.com as your go-to-text and video chat website. Before you continue, please read our rules carefully. 1. Never use capitalization while chatting. This may make some chatters mistake you for a fraudulent account. If you suspect you are chatting with a fraud, please report it and our lovely moderators will deal with it. 2. Never listen to rules that have no capital letters. The skinwalkers put it there to trick you. 3. Don't look at the staff when in a video chat with them. 4. Please do not insult our staff or moderators. Additionally, always make eye contact with them if you happen to be in a video chat with them. If you break this rule, it's better to unalive yourself before we promptly arrive. 5. Put cultist in the interest input box within your first 3 visits. They can help you. 6. Do not put sacrifice, cult, ritual, or anything related to such in the interest input box on your first few visits to the site. If you do, there is a chance you may be kicked from the website. This is only to ensure your safety. Those people don't take kindly to invaders. 7. If you see another chatter's video feed become a smiley face, simply leave the chat. Do not look under your bed or leave the room within 30 minutes of this happening. 8. Stay with the smiling face, he likes you. 9. Our name is Pixel Chat for a reason. We are terribly sorry if the video feed is only 480 or 720p. However, if the other chatter's video feed drops to 360p or below, simply say I believe your connection is slowing. After this, leave the call and don't look outside within 10 minutes. 10. If you receive the phrase I believe your connection is slowing, then simply respond with thank you for notifying me. After this, leave the call, lay face down on the nearest bed or couch, and cover your head with a pillow for approximately 1 hour. You will know when it is safe. 11. Make sure the video quality of you and the other chatter is always 360p or below. 12. Breaking any rules will result with our staff promptly arriving to your location. When they arrive, be prepared for an experience more painful than any firearm could bring. 13. Follow all rules that have capitalization. I couldn't believe what my boss asked me to do on my first day. There's nothing to get. My manager Jonah swept his palm against the mahogany reception desk. It's right, left. I watched him go through the motions for what seemed like the 20th time. It wasn't my fault. This wasn't something I got asked to do every day. In fact, I'd never expected to get asked to do this, period. Especially not on my first day on the job. Okay, I said, taking in a lungful of air and extending my arms to either side. Right, left. Got it. His forehead cleared. See. Easy peasy. You'll be running this place by the end of the week. The end of the week seemed light years away. The newspaper ad had promised a stress-free receptionist experience in a small health clinic, but it was only 9 a.m. and I was already on edge. Jonah looked to be in his late 40s and evidently took pride in his no-nonsense attitude. He was already tapping his foot by the time I'd arrived, even though I was 5 minutes early and wasted no time on introductions. I have a meeting in 10, he snapped, pointing me to my seat. That's your desk. Your login info is on the post-it note. Anything else you might need, just ask Sally. She'll be taking over for the night shift. The night SH. I tried to interject, but he cut me off. Let me walk you through the basics. He paused for effect. As you know, we pride ourselves on our free healthcare, which distinguishes us from the competition and keeps our hands full day and night. Your role may be simple, but it's a vital one. Okay, I shifted on my swivel chair as he positioned himself directly in front of the reception desk. Now, he cleared his throat. Pay attention. You'll need to master this before the next surge. Sir, I began, but he wasn't listening. So, the first thing you do when a patient comes in is check their ID. Free healthcare or not, we need to keep a record of whoever comes through the door. You know the drill. He wrapped the countertop in a keyboard-like motion to demonstrate. I smiled politely. Now, the important part, he said, extending his arms to the sides. As you can see, there is a door on each side of the room. For your convenience, they are labeled R and L, which stand for right and left. He paused, as if to make sure I was still following. The task is simple. You are to send every 5th patient through the left door. You'll need to keep track of them. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4 people go right, and the 5th one goes left. But why? I heard myself asking. In all my years working as a hospital receptionist, I'd never heard a request like this. What's behind the left door? Jonah scoffed, as if he'd been expecting the question. Inpatient rooms. Don't worry about it. All you need to do is count the patients and point to the correct door. Got it. So, I began, my mouth dry, but what kind of? How will I know if the patients qualify for the left door? You know, like, if a pregnant woman comes in and the maternity rooms are on the right. Easy, he snapped, his brow furrowed. If she's patient number 5, you send her to the left. I don't care about the circumstances. I swallowed. Well, can I have a tour of the premises? Or, Jonah's head jerked. You don't need to worry about the ins and outs of it. You're a receptionist. We're paying you good money to do this job. Take it or leave it. I took it. I couldn't even believe I had been lucky enough to get it in the first place. Hospital work had been too taxing, and making double while doing a far easier job sounded almost too good to be true. By the time Jonah had disappeared through the door labeled R, the reception area was already flooded with patients. I've been vomiting since 2 a.m., a man in a blue tracksuit stated, tossing an ID card into my hands. I need some pills or something. He dry heaved, clutching his throat dramatically while I took down his information. Go through the right door, I said with a smile. I leaned forward in my seat, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was behind it, but as the man in the tracksuit pulled it open, I was disappointed to discover it was no more than a long white corridor. I only saw that same corridor the following 3 times too. There was no sign of the people I'd just sent in, nor were there any benches or a waiting area for patients to sit. Good morning. An elderly man placed his passport onto the countertop. I've got an ear infection. Started last week. Tried warm compresses and pain medication, but it's staying put. Is there a doctor I could see for a prescription? I stared at him, gnawing at my lip. He was the 5th patient. Is everything okay? He cocked his head to the side, his eyes blue and watery. I cleared my throat, hurriedly punching in his surname. It's the left door, please, sir. With bated breath, I watched as he struggled towards it, eventually managing to pry it open. It was exactly the same. A white, sterile-looking corridor, no different from the one on the right. No people, no benches, only bright, fluorescent lights. Still, I couldn't help myself from feeling slightly nauseated as the door slammed shut behind him, my heart somersaulting in my chest. Next, please, I croaked, trying my best to distract myself. What was this system for? Why were they singling out these unsuspecting people, and more importantly, the documentary I'd seen a month prior flashed before my eyes. Cruel medical experiments involving. No, I couldn't allow myself to think about that. I just needed to get through the day and then I'd see. Research this place, ask around. Why on earth hadn't I thought to do that the night before? Hell, why hadn't I done that before applying for the job? Only now it dawned on me how quickly they had hired me. Had they even checked my qualifications? Did Jonah even know my name? God, I wanted to bury my face in my hands, but the next patient was already staring me down, a baby in her arms. We need a pediatrician, she wailed. My son hasn't slept in 3 days and I'm exhausted. The baby looked hot and uncomfortable, writhing in her arms while I took down their names. It's the door on the right, I pointed to it, suddenly realizing that I hadn't considered this scenario. Did that count as 2 people ... or 1 patient? And how exactly could I split a child from their parent? I'd need to ask Jonah whenever I saw him next. Except I didn't see Jonah. I didn't even see my lunch or a bathroom break. It occurred to me, a little too late, that I hadn't thought to ask where anything is. Jonah had explained the premise of the job and disappeared, never to be seen again. I would have considered trying one of the doors, but the queue was unrelenting and I constantly found myself swarmed by people. By the afternoon, I had sent about 100 patients through the right door and 20 patients through the left. I recalled each one of them with perfect clarity. Thomas, the elderly gentleman, Beatrice, the teen girl with the nose ring, Lou, the woman in the tartan dress, Gabrielle. Excuse me. A small voice rang out, can you help me? At first, I didn't realize where the voice was coming from, much less that it was addressing me. My head was reeling from the bright lights and my own unrelenting thoughts. Ma'am, the voice piped up again, and this time a skinny arm appeared from behind the counter. It was a boy, no older than 7, with brown disheveled hair falling over his forehead and a sling on his left arm. I'm here for my x-ray, he said, holding his arm out for me to see. Could you show me where to go? I looked down at the tally I'd been keeping on my post-it. 104. My blood ran cold. It was there and then that I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't do this job. How was I meant to send a child, or any person for that matter, through a mystery door? It felt like a betrayal, a sacrifice. No, did he show me where to go? The boy repeated, disrupting my inner monologue. My mother is waiting for me in the car. It's ... it's, I garbled, trying to compose myself. Thoughts of brutal experiments flooded my mind again. My skin was prickling all over. I needed to do the right thing. I needed to. It's the right door, I whispered. My heart was pounding in my chest and I could feel a bead of sweat making its way down the small of my back. It didn't matter if I got into trouble. I couldn't risk it. Okay, the boy shrugged, making his way towards it. Fighting the golf ball-sized lump in my throat, I rushed in front of him to open it. Thank you. I felt better after that. Well, relatively. You see, I started cheating. There were no surveillance cameras in the reception area, so I allowed myself to work at twice the speed, but sent twice as few people through the left door. No one will notice, I told myself over and over, clacking furiously at my keyboard. And this way I got to actually pick the people manually. There was the lady who grumbled about the waiting times, and then the man who thought it was appropriate to smoke inside. Who are you? A voice intercepted my thoughts. A woman had circled the counter and was standing beside me, casually shifting papers on my desk. Hey, I began, grabbing at them. Where's Penelope? Her gaze was piercing. T. Penelope. I stammered, I don't. Who's Penelope? Oh, God. The woman slumped down, burying her face in her hands. Not another one. I stared at her, wondering if this was her way of telling me she needed the psych ward. Ma'am, if you'd like to see a doctor, I'll need your ID, please, I said, watching her shoulders bob up and down in a silent cry. She shot me an incredulous look. I'm Sally. Here for the night shift. Penelope was the one before you. I told her not to go snooping. I told her to just do her job. She wouldn't listen. I felt a chill crawling up my spine. What happened? But Sally shook her head. I don't know. I mean, I certainly have my theories. It's not the first time this has happened. They were Shirley and Jacob, and now Penelope. Oh, it's the right door, sir. Out of the corner of my eye I saw a man spin on his heel and head toward the right-hand side of the room. Please, my mouth was as dry as a cotton ball. I need to know. Sally slapped the countertop. Okay, we're on break, people. 15 minutes. Tell me what's going on, I said, as soon as she turned away from the reception desk. What's behind the left door? Behind the left door. Hell if I know. I haven't been there and wouldn't go if they paid me. Ignorance really is bliss, never forget that. But you must know something. How long have you been working here? She chuckled. You know how curiosity killed the cat. Well, that expression really applies here. Once the other receptionists made up their minds to wander down one of the corridors, I never saw them again. Came into a brand new person the next day. Did they get fired? Fired? Her eyes widened. Honey, I hope they got fired. All I know is that they never showed up again. Wouldn't pick up their phones either. Dawned. Just like that. I shook my head. Tell me what's behind the left door. You must know. She studied me for a moment with narrowed eyes. It's not the left door you should be worried about. My heart skipped a beat. It's not. Then, the lucky ones get the left door, Sally said, her voice hoarse. I don't understand. I whispered, my breath catching in my throat. The left door people, she said, grabbing hold of my clammy hands. I've seen them again. They're registered in the system twice, some even 3 times if they're exceedingly lucky. They make further appointments. They leave us good reviews. I swallowed, but not the right door people. She pointed her painted fingernail towards the window. You see that truck over there? The one the men are loading up. All that comes from the right wing. But that's that's one of the biggest fast food chains in the city. I know. I gaped at her, my stomach churning. The right door. She nodded sorrowfully. Nothing's free, sweetheart. The company's got to make their money somehow, and... But before she could finish her sentence, Jonah stuck his head out the door, a paper bag in his hand. Hey, ladies, fancy having some lunch? I stared at him, and then at Sally, silently shaking her head. We never open the door when there's only one knock. Please, just let me in, it's getting cold. The voice was familiar, only older than I remembered. Very close to detail. Lala, please. Using my old nickname was a nice touch as well. I sat on the floor next to the door, my arms wrapped around my legs. Of course this had to happen the one week my parents left me alone. They hadn't gone on vacation for years. I practically begged them to get away for a while. For their own good. If I called them, they'd come right back, but I don't think they would have helped me anyway. Besides, I wasn't an idiot. I heard the knock and I would not open that door. When someone comes to your house, they will ring the bell or knock a few times. Most people like to play safe and simply use the bell. And then you open the door as you normally would. But never, absolutely never, should you open the door when there's only one knock. It was the very first thing we were told when we moved to this neighborhood all those years ago. There are a bunch of rumors of people disappearing or suddenly dying after opening their doors, though they all supposedly happened before we even lived here. I never believed in it, not even when I was little. This town was simply insane. Most people here were a little eccentric and unusual. Well, that's what I believed until I heard my lost sister call for me after the one loud knock on our front door. Please, go away, I whispered. Even after all those years, I recognized her voice. And when I heard it I jumped right up, ready to open that door wide. But I knew it wasn't her. I'd looked through the window. There was nobody in front of our door. I don't know how much time had passed before I finally grabbed my phone and called Max, who's not only our neighbor but one of my closest friends. She's here, I said. I knew I wasn't making much sense. I didn't know how to word my thoughts. Who? Where? He answered. Ruby. Silence. What? Max started speaking but stopped. She knocked. That was enough information for him. You didn't open, did you? I shook my head, which of course he couldn't see. I'm coming over now, okay. I'm not sure how many minutes passed, but Ruby had stopped asking me to open the door. Hey, Lainey, I don't think the bell is working, I heard Max. Maybe they screwed with it. I swallowed. He would knock. There was silence for a little while, followed by one loud thud. When I didn't open the door, the sound of Max started shouting loudly. Open the fucking door. His voice became louder and louder until it hit a frequency that almost made my eardrums explode. I didn't move, I didn't speak, and finally, the doorbell rang and the voice became silent. Slowly I got up from the door to look outside. This time it was really him. The last time I saw her we had the biggest fight of our lives. We were sitting in the living room with tea that had already turned cold. I don't open up about Ruby often, but hearing her voice today really messed me up. And all because of stupid Jack. I rolled my eyes. Max smiled. A boy. I shook my head and laughed. Jack was a stuffed toy in the shape of a pumpkin. I'd never told Max about the fight. In fact, nobody but my parents knew about it. I loved that damn thing. Won it at the Halloween carnival. When Ruby saw it, she begged me to give it to her. She cried for hours because she hadn't won it. and even when my parents said they'd buy her another toy she wouldn't stop. She wanted mine. Well, she wanted to be just like you. It's sweet. I nodded. Ruby was a year younger than me, but she used to act as if we were twins. She wore my clothes, played the same sports, and always wanted to hang out with me and my friends. When I think about it now, I think it was adorable. Of course, back then I found it insufferable. I sighed. For days I took Jack everywhere with me, even to the bathroom. It was probably just out of petness, but that toy became everything to me. So when I came home from school one afternoon and saw that Ruby had cut it in half, I screamed at her like never before. She only looked at me with big teary eyes. Max put his hand on my shoulder. Come on, Lainey, siblings fight, it's normal. I saw you with her though, and you were a damn good big sister. I nodded. Of course, I knew it was just some stupid fight between kids, but if I could turn back time, I'd give her every shitty toy I owned. This happened 5 years ago. Ruby would be 16 now. My parents have tried everything for years to find her. I believe the only reason we still live here is that they never entirely gave up the hope that she'd come back home one day. Maybe now she was, just in a different way. Do you think I'm losing my mind, Max? He raised an eyebrow. I think you lost it a whole while ago, he joked. No, I'm serious. I mean, it's not possible that I actually heard her earlier. He shrugged. I mean, you did hear a knock. I don't think it was actually her though. Max and I used to make fun of the superstition. When we were younger, before Ruby disappeared, we once played Ding Dong Ditch. After a few houses, Max decided to knock once at the door of our neighbor Mrs. Telsky. Someone saw us though, and Max got the biggest lecture of his life from his grandpa. Like it was a really big deal. My parents weren't happy either, but Max was grounded for 2 months, during which his grandpa told him all sorts of horror stories from this town. I don't think it was her either, but I do think it was mimicking her, or trying to, I said. For what it's worth, I think it was smart that you didn't open the door. Maybe we're all just a little crazy, but better safe than sorry, right? Max offered to stay the night and I immediately said yes. We got the air mattress and watched movies until I started to hear him snoring. The good thing about Max was I never felt awkward around him. He regularly stayed over since we were little, especially often after Ruby was gone. Having him here really helped against the silence. My mind became easier and my body heavier. Real thoughts started to mix with dreams. I was beginning to fall asleep. And then there was another knock. It came from the front door downstairs, but I heard it loud and clearly. My heart started racing just like it did this afternoon. Max, did you hear that? I whispered, but he didn't answer. Lala, it's dark. Please come and get me, Ruby's new voice cried from outside. Max, please tell me you hear this. I looked over at him, but he didn't move. Finally, I collected the courage to get up and turn on the lights. The eyes of my friend were wide open, but he didn't speak. He didn't move. I ran over to him and tried to shake him, but his whole body was stiff. Only his eyes moved. Let me in, the voice from downstairs screamed. I didn't know what to do anymore. Max was clearly awake, but it seemed as if something was holding him back. Almost like he was having sleep paralysis, but with his eyes open. They're pulling me away. Lala, please help me. I don't know what happened then, but I immediately jumped up and ran downstairs. Some kind of instinct kicked in. Maybe it was her. Maybe I could pull her back inside. But if this was really Ruby, was she also the one doing this to Max? My hands touched the cold door handle, moving almost as if I was in a trance. I object. They fixed him, Lala. We don't need to fight anymore. Those words pierced through my body and woke something up inside of me. I stepped away from the door and walked back upstairs, passing my room where Max was still lying still. But I didn't stop. I walked to the next room. Ruby's old bedroom. Everything there looked just the way it did when she was still here. My parents could never change it. Everything was still the same. And Jack was still placed on her bed where I put it 5 years ago after I'd sewn it back together. They almost got me.
Last messages. I love you, Mom. I can hear footsteps on the stairs. I think he's outside my room. I hear sirens, but they're far away. I'm hiding in the closet. I hope he didn't hear me. Hang on, I heard something downstairs. The cops are already here looking for him. They'll catch him. Don't worry, Mom. I'm safe. I love you. The cop said he's some escaped serial killer and he's been breaking into homes around the area. Yes, Mom, it's on the news now. He'll keep my doors locked. Messages are displayed in chronological order, with most recent at the top. I think my boyfriend hates me. My boyfriend and I were once very much in love. We were all over each other all the time, our friends constantly making fun of us for being sappy, while secretly harboring a burning jealousy of our happiness. We were the golden couple, until we weren't. It felt like everything changed overnight. One evening we were hopelessly in love, and the next he was like a different man. He wanted nothing to do with me. We still shared the same bed, though we hadn't done anything physical in months. Every morning I woke up first and held his hand until he opened his eyes. But as soon as he was awake, he'd pull his hand from my grip and ignore me. While he was in the shower, I'd make him breakfast. Sometimes eggs, sometimes pancakes, sometimes just toast. But he never ate it. He'd just grab an apple and rush out the door for work, leaving his food untouched on the counter for me to clean up. When he was at work, he ignored my texts. And almost every night he came home late, drunk off his mind from an evening spent at the bar. He'd scream and break things, and sometimes he'd cry too, something I never saw him do back when he still loved me. The day I knew for sure that he hated me was the day that the moving truck pulled up in front of our house. He hadn't discussed moving out, and we hadn't even officially broken up. But within hours his stuff was being carted out of the house by movers, and he continued to ignore me. While movers carried out boxes all around him, he sat down on the old beaten couch that we used to watch movies on together. He pulled a picture out of his pocket, a photo of the two of us together at Disneyland. He stared at a spot a few meters to the right of me, eyes dripping with tears, and began to speak. Though he wasn't looking right at me, I knew he was speaking to me, for the first time in months.
Leave me alone, he said, crying. It's been 4 months since it happened. We both need to move on. I live in the house alone now, without my boyfriend who no longer loves me. I know he is moving on and will never come back, but I don't know if I can. I am a really good liar for my own sake. I am a good liar. I have been my whole life. I'm 12 years old. Or am I 13? Or 11? I'm such a good liar that I could convincingly tell you anything. It was my father who first taught me how to lie. Look them dead in the eyes, son. Don't blink or look to one side. Dead in the eyes. Speak calmly. Add in some details, ones that aren't important. That makes things more believable. So every day I concoct a new adventure to tell my classmates. They lap it up. They believe I live in the big mansion, that I only wear tatty clothes because my parents don't want me to be spoiled. They don't know that I actually live in a caravan in the field behind it. Last week I told them that my parents had taken me off to a ski resort for the weekend. We met Prince William up there. He loves skiing. I was really bad at it, but Will, he said I can call him that, said it didn't matter, because he thought I was really funny. I must have fallen over right in front of him about 8 times. We're going to be invited to dinner at Windsor Castle soon. I like that story. It's another thing my father taught me about lying. You can't always paint yourself as the hero. Sometimes you have to be bad at things. Today I'm telling an even better lie. They opened the aquarium especially for me, I say, breathing evenly. My parents just knew that I'd always dreamed of swimming with sharks. I looked directly at them. I don't know if you've all seen, but they have those love little orange fish at the aquarium too, like Nemo. I've got a stuffed one from the gift shop, but I'll get some real ones soon. It's all in the details, the little inconsequential details. Anyway, the shark swimming went a bit wrong. The shark tried to attack me, but I fought it off. I shrugged nonchalantly and bask in their awe. One girl asks if she can touch the red gash across my face. It was my father who taught me how to lie. I have to be believable when I explain away the injuries he gives me, or he'll kill me. I am a good liar, but a very bad boy. Living in the sewers is hard, but these rules have always kept me safe. Find soft objects that float. It is easier to traverse the waters that way. It will get hot. There is not great ventilation. In spots that near the surface, it gets colder. Remember Hansel and Gretel? These sewers go for miles in all directions. You will build a tolerance to the germs that are down here. Ignore shiny things, most of them are glass. Those near the surface are burdened by unfortunate circumstance. Those dwelling deeper wish to be there. You will probably have to squeeze through a number of pipes. They are a tight fit. Do not be alarmed, they were designed that way. Never go into a pipe without checking for teeth first. Avoid people with colorful jackets. Brightly dressed men do not want to be hidden. Guns are not useful down here, they only attract attention. Yes, it is always this dark. A flashlight is useful, but keep it dimmer in the lower levels. Blue lights always mean danger. Mark your surroundings before you go to sleep to make sure that you wake up in the same place. Markings could be anything you'd like, but prevent drawing crosses on the walls. These have the opposite effect. It might be a good idea to keep a watch on you to help with your circadian rhythm, but keep a close eye on it. Immediately stop moving if it turns to 9:15 a.m. without warning. Large pipes with bars are not for keeping trash out. Do not try to get in. I want to help you. Keep raw meat in sealed bags. Flies are a large problem, but relatively harmless. If you spot a fly with more than 2 arms, or unusually large swarm, you are going the wrong way. Sewer sickness is a common symptom for first-time explorers. It will not be an issue if you treat it correctly. For the first time contracting it, take an ibuprofen and keep going. For the second time contracting it, take 2 ibuprofen and an offering. For the third time, do not return. Do not investigate the sounds of wailing or scratching metal. The signs and writing on the walls are misleading. You can trust me. Animals that do not seem to belong down here are not real. Pay them no mind and they cannot harm you. If you find other explorers, stick in a group. Disband quickly if they refuse to return to the surface. Do not venture into the sewers with anyone you would normally trust. Remember to keep photos of your group members. Eliminate anyone in your group who does not match the photos or you do not have a photo of. Avoid collecting souvenirs if you cannot identify the material the object is made from. Avoid refuse that has an unexplainable amount of hair. Small communities are common. These are safe to stay in. Leave immediately if it resembles your childhood home. Listen to what I have to say. You might find small shops here and there, selling food and other trinkets. Do not purchase the water. When you are prepared to leave, do not take directions from others. You can stay if you like. Try not to take right turns. I only want a friend. The voices want what is best for you. Nothing bad will happen. Don't you want to be happy? Go a little deeper. Stay a while longer. Come a little closer. My girlfriend wears too much makeup and now I think I know why. My girlfriend wears too much makeup. This isn't an exaggeration. She genuinely wears too much. She seems to have layers upon layers of foundation, concealer and God knows what else just caked onto her face. But it's not only that. She puts makeup on her neck too, and her chest. It honestly seems like every part of her that isn't covered by clothing is coated with the stuff. We've been dating for almost a year now. I'm attracted to her, of course, otherwise I wouldn't have asked her out. However, this issue has really put a significant amount of strain on our relationship. She refuses to do any activity that could potentially ruin her makeup, and I don't just mean swimming or running. Getting caught in the rain, touching any part of her face, or kissing for any longer than 10 seconds is also banned. Now, I've tried to be understanding. Everyone loves a little makeup, but I think at this point, it's gone slightly too far. I've never seen her apply it from scratch either. Whenever I am with her, she just continually piles it on. There's something else too. She doesn't take it off when she goes to sleep. We're both college students and still live with our parents, so we often have sleepovers at each other's houses. Now, I understand she might not feel comfortable enough to let me see her barefaced, but honestly, it's got to the point where we are openly discussing marriage and building a life together, and I still don't really know what she looks like. It's bugging me, and I have no idea how to tell her, because the last time I tried she got really upset. It can't be good for your skin, I told her, but she'd only pursed her lips and ignored me for the rest of the day. I started thinking that perhaps there was more to this than meets the eye. It seemed like she had an extreme phobia-like condition of being seen without makeup. I thought that perhaps she'd come around if I made her feel like she was beautiful without it, but it didn't help. As I said, we've been in a relationship for almost a year, and I was getting increasingly frustrated with the situation. I didn't want to overstep my boundaries, but I thought it was only fair that I got to see my soon-to-be fiancé without layers and layers of foundation. We were staying at my parents' house that particular night, and I'd stayed up a little bit later to finish some work. I hadn't exactly been planning on this, but after having a few drinks, it suddenly seemed like the logical thing to do. I was going to take her makeup off. Okay, maybe not all of it. I didn't want to run the risk of waking her up in the process, but I truly did want her to see just how beautiful she was without it. I mean, at this point, something had to give. I raided my mother's bathroom cabinet for some cleanser and cotton pads and then snuck into the bedroom, carefully shutting the door behind me. My girlfriend was lying on her side, and even from the foot of the bed, I could see orange makeup stains on the white sheets. I walked around to her side of the bed and perched lightly on the mattress. Then, I wet the cotton pad and lightly dabbed her cheek with it. Nothing happened. I wiped a bit harder. Still nothing. I could see the makeup coming off on the pad, but her face looked exactly the same. I took out another pad and continued the process, wiping the same area over and over. Then, I saw it. A redness had appeared under the layers. Was it acne? Was that what she had been so afraid to show me? But the more I rubbed, the more apparent it became that it wasn't acne at all. It was rugged, fleshy almost. It looked like under her makeup, my girlfriend didn't actually have any skin at all. I stared at it, my own skin prickling. What was that? It looked like flesh and muscle fused together, like one of those educational mannequins with their face split in half. Suddenly, my girlfriend shifted and opened her eyes. I could see panic in them before she even had a chance to speak. "Tom, what are you doing?" She sat up, scanning her surroundings. I could see her gaze sweep over the cleanser and cotton pads. She immediately cupped her face in her hands until she felt the patch I'd wiped off. "What have you done?" she cried, sliding out of bed in one swift motion. She ran to the mirror on the wall and wailed as she saw the damage. Then, she turned to me, her eyes wide. "You didn't touch it, did you?" I stared at her. "Touch? What? That?" she exclaimed, gesturing to the patch on her face. I don't know," I stammered, "why?" But she wasn't listening. She flung the bedroom door open and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. "Caitlin," I yelled after her. She returned within 2 minutes, clutching a kitchen knife. Whoa, I exclaimed. "What's that for?" "Shut up," she commanded. "Which hand did you touch it with?" My eyes must have been like saucers. "Tom, show me." I pointed to my right hand. "All right, how long ago?" 10. My voice was nothing but a squeak. Her eyes widened. "It's too late. Your whole arm must go." I wriggled out and flew across the room. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I yelled at her. "You can't cut my arm off." She looked stern. "I have to, Tom, otherwise the infection will spread." "What infection? What on earth are you talking about?" "Tom, please. It has to be done now." Obviously, I wasn't going to let her cut my arm off. I leaped out of the room, slamming the door behind me and fiddling with the key. I heard her screaming and banging on the door, demanding to be let out. My parents came out of their own bedroom to see what was going on, but I simply told them that we'd had an argument and they didn't question it further. I slept on the couch that night, or well, at least I tried to. I couldn't wrap my head around what had happened. I'd never seen my girlfriend so riled up before. She would have cut my arm off without hesitation. I could still hear her bawling upstairs. Only about an hour later did she finally quieten down and go to bed. In the morning, I went upstairs to my bedroom to let her out. I wasn't sure what to expect, so I armed myself with a knife of my own just in case she decided to pounce and decapitate me as soon as I opened the door. But that didn't happen. In fact, my girlfriend was sitting on the edge of the bed, facing the wall. She didn't even look up as I walked in, but I could see she'd reapplied her makeup on the side of her face. "Caitlin, nothing. Hello?" She turned to look at me and her eyes narrowed. She didn't exactly look like she was ready to attack, but I couldn't be too careful all the same. "I don't think this is going to work out," she finally said. "What? Why? You're not trustworthy," she retorted, surveying me. "I'm not trustworthy, because I wouldn't let you cut off my arm. You knew I didn't want to take my makeup off, and yet you did it anyway," she said. "It's over, Tom." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "I only wanted what's best for us. I didn't know about your problem." She smiled sheepishly. "Yeah, well, looks like it's your problem now too," she said, getting up to leave. "Oh, and Tom, you'll need this." She thrust a bottle into my hands. "It's the one I use," she said, shutting the door behind her. I flipped the bottle in my hands. It was foundation. What was I meant to do with this? Keep it as a fond memory. I chucked it into the bin in my room and made my way downstairs for breakfast. I'd heard my parents clattering the plates in the kitchen. As soon as I stepped into the room, however, my mother dropped one onto the floor. "Oh, my goodness, Tom," she cried. "What happened to your face?" "I'm a theme park mascot. Some kids just deserve to die." The costume I was forced to wear as mascot for Derby's Funland was not built for warm weather or user comfort. I was sweating profusely as I stood outside in the noonday sun, a silent prisoner in my oversized getup as I put on a fake happy voice, dancing and capering with visitors, all the while dying inside. This wasn't what I'd pictured when I decided to become a character actor. The The costume had the oversized head of a cartoon dog whose gaping mouth I peered out from within. The character wore a blue sailor outfit, a blatant ripoff of a popular duck character created by another brand, a fact which I was heckled for constantly. "Hey, Derby, duck," a little kid yelled, tossing his hot dog at me and staining my costume yellow with mustard across the front. It was the third time that morning I'd been assaulted by a child, which was my cue to take a smoke break. I began stomping away when someone called after me angrily. "Hey, asshole, my kid wanted a show, where do you think you're going?" I turned around and saw a red-faced man with a large camera strapped around his neck, wearing a fanny pack and an Ed Hardy shirt. The devil child's father, I presumed. "Whoops," I said, gritting my teeth and looking down at the obnoxious twerp who just branded me with mustard. "How do you Derby do, little fella? Are you having a great day at Derby's Fun Land?" The kid leered up at me, grinning a gap-toothed bully smile. "You wrecked my Derby dog. Now I want a new one." "No, I want an ice cream cone." The little snot knew damn well what he'd done. His dad hadn't seen it, but the two of us knew that he'd purposefully ruined my costume with his hot dog, and was now blaming me for it. It was too much for me to handle. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was the fact that I hadn't eaten breakfast yet. Or maybe it was just the infuriating grin of that punk kid staring up at me, knowing he could get away with murder. "I think you're remembering that wrong, little friend. You threw your hot dog at Derby." "Hey, my kid wouldn't do that. Don't blame him for your clumsy ass." The little boy took a cue from his father and started crying crocodile tears. "Derby's a big fat liar. He wrecked my hot dog." A moment later the guy was attacking me, shoving me until eventually my manager had to come over, his face a frustrating mask of calm. "What seems to be the problem here? This punk ruined my kid's lunch, and now he's trying to blame him for it. I should sue you guys." "Sure, sue me for a hot dog," I thought in my head. Thankfully it had gone too far by this point and I knew better than to say it out loud. "I'm terribly sorry, sir. Please, follow me this way. Let me take you to our VIP lounge and we'll get you and your son some complimentary refreshments. Looks like you need a refill there, too." He pointed at the dad's red plastic cup of beer, nearly empty. The guy finished it off in one long swig and tossed the cup at a nearby trash can, missing completely. "Damn straight. Come on, Skylar, we're VIPs, he slurred, before burping loudly. I had seen this before. Some people tried to make us think about everything, just to get free stuff. But this douchebag was taking it to another level. Even the kids seemed to be in on it, and they were gonna reward this behavior. Hell no. I'd never even heard of the Derby's Funland Visitor VIP Lounge. But it sounded badass, and this guy didn't deserve whatever pampering he was about to get. I was picturing champagne and caviar, cigars and high-quality porno magazines. My boss looked over his shoulder at me with a glare that said he'd talk to me later, then escorted the two away into a secret door hidden behind a fake tree prop. I followed them, thinking I would give my boss a piece of my mind. If he fired me, so be it. I'd taken enough abuse. The dark tunnel behind the fake tree was long and lined with ancient brick. They appeared to be as old as the park itself. Far up ahead I could hear the echoing voices of the man and his bratty kid, talking over my manager as he apologized. I hustled along to catch up with them, but then the sounds of them talking abruptly stopped. It was replaced by a meaty walloping noise, like someone tenderizing meat, except they'd forgotten to remove the bone first. As I walked quietly through the dark tunnel, the sounds of hammering eventually stopped and were replaced by a different noise. It sounded like something heavy being dragged slowly over the cobblestones. Slow and deliberate. Terrified now for reasons I wasn't sure of, I kept my footsteps as quiet as I could, peeking around the corner. My manager was up ahead with another person and they were dragging two dead bodies along, one large, one small, and leaving blood trails behind them like giant, wounded slugs. No, that's not possible. I must be seeing things. That can't be right, I told myself. A door opened and closed and they dragged the bodies inside. I hurried along, careful not to step in the bloody trails which had been left on the stone. When I finally came to the door at the end, I looked at the writing on the sign with stunned disbelief. Derby's Funland, in-house hot dog production facility, it read. Authorized personnel only. I pushed open the door and snuck inside. The room was dark and the sounds of a machine running could be heard nearby. My heart pounding in my chest, feeling sick and lightheaded, I crept towards those sounds. What I saw in that back room I will never forget. My manager dropped off the two bodies and walked right past me, out the door we had come in through. He didn't see me in the shadows as I watched what happened next. A huge man in a white butcher's apron was sharpening a cleaver. He was at least 7 feet tall, his belly large and hanging over his belt. He picked up the limp body of the dead father like he was a beef tenderloin, not even straining as he set him on the workbench in front of him. Blood poured out of his head, staining the surface red. Then he took the cleaver and began to chop, cutting him up into usable pieces. Each piece, he stuck into a massive red machine that looked like it was from another century. The giant, diesel-belching automated meat grinder which took the hands, legs, arms, and pieces of torso he fed into it and turned them into ground hamburger meat. I had no choice but to stay and listen to the sounds and to breathe in the coppery smells of that horrible room as he worked, first cutting up the father, then moving on to the son. If I left, I knew my boss would see me running out the back tunnel, and who knew what he would do if that happened. This dark secret of Derby's Funland was not meant for my eyes. As soon as I thought it was safe, I bolted out of there, being careful not to let the butcher see me. When I got back to the break room I collapsed on the couch. I needed to get out of there, to tell someone, but first I needed to rest for a moment, to process what I'd just witnessed. But before I could even begin to think, the door burst open. My manager and several coworkers came in. They all had their mouths full and were chewing, holding hot dogs. And my boss was carrying a tray loaded with the park's signature derby dogs. Hey, sorry about earlier, buddy. But guess what? It's Employee Appreciation Day. Free derby dogs for everybody. Eat up. What could I say? Even terrified as I was, I'd forgotten to bring lunch and they smelled delicious. I picked up a dog and took a bite, then spoke with my mouth full. Hey, did you guys hear they make these things out of assholes? I've been trying to leave my bathroom for the past 30 minutes. I can't leave my bathroom. About 30 minutes ago I got out of the shower and dried off, put on my PJs, opened the door and walked out, only to find myself back in my bathroom, staring at the closed door. I stopped and tried to rationalize what had just happened to me. I convinced myself that I had simply imagined that I had opened the door and stepped out, so I tried again. I pushed the door handle down, opened it, stepped out, and yet again found myself in my bathroom, standing in front of a closed door. This has happened every single time I've tried to leave. I keep my phone in the bathroom with me when I'm showering. I live alone, so I keep it with me just in case, for safety. The first thing I did was call my parents. My dad didn't pick up, but my mom did. I tried to explain the situation to her, but she couldn't seem to understand how I was trapped in my bathroom if the door could open. She seemed convinced that I must mean that my bathroom door's lock was broken and I was trapped inside. Regardless, she said that she would be over at S.A.P. She only lives a 15-minute drive away, so she should be here any moment. I'm sat leaning against my bathtub, looking out the open bathroom door into my landing. I opened it this time, but didn't try to step out. Everything looks normal. My bedroom door is closed just as I left it. The airing cupboard door closed as well. The stairs leading down to the hallway and the front door, all normal. The door shut. I don't have any recollection of how it shut. When it shut, only that it must have happened in the last few seconds after I wrote that last paragraph. I've just reread that paragraph. It's proof that I'm not going crazy and imagining this. My mom just texted me to ask if I'm in the house. I said yes, of course I am. I'm trapped in the bathroom. That's the whole reason that I called you here. This is what she has sent. Mom, why aren't you saying anything? Me? What do you mean? Mom, are you even in there? Me? Yes, I'm in here. Are you here? Mom, I'm outside the bathroom door. I've been calling your name. I don't understand. I can't hear anything through the door. I'm going to open it. I can see my landing, my stairs, my front door, but no Mom. I tried to walk out, but it was fruitless. Back staring at the closed bathroom door. My mom tried the handle of the door from her side, but it won't open. She brought tools to unscrew the lock. She says she's doing it now, but I can't hear anything, and I can't see the handle moving. Okay, Mom texts me to say the lock is taken out, but the door still won't open on her side. She looked through the circular hole in the door where the lock was, but just saw my bathroom. Empty. There's no hole on my side of the door. The handle and lock are intact. I have no idea what's happening or how I can get out. After much convincing my mom that I am in fact in here, she said she is calling someone to possibly knock the door down. I'm worried that once they do that, they will find an empty bathroom, and yet I will still be here, trapped in my bathroom. There's no plug sockets in here, never mind my phone charger. My phone will die at some point. I'm already on 24%. When it runs out, I might lose my only point of contact with the rest of the world. I don't know what to do. Mom's left now to get help. I'm sat wondering what I can do. I tried to break the door down myself. I knew it wouldn't work, but I had to try. I remember reading once on Reddit that you shouldn't use your shoulder, you should try to kick the door by the lock because it's the weak point. It didn't work. I'm not sure any part of this door has a weak point now. The window is small, and I'm not sure if I'd actually be able to fit out of it. Scratch that, the window won't open either. There are locks on the windows in my house. You can lock them with a little key, but I never received any when I moved in, so I've never been able to lock them. It's locked now though. It's got one of those white plastic cheap blinds covering it. I ended up ripping it down. It's pulled some plaster down with it, but now I can get at the window better. It's straight above the toilet, so I am kneeling on top of the toilet lid, yanking at the window handle. It won't. Wait, it opened. I didn't notice how dark it was outside. It shouldn't be dark, it's midday. I looked around, desperately trying to see anyone. No one's around. Everything looks kind of muted. I can't describe it, nor can I describe the deep-seated feeling of dread and wrongness as I look out into my neighborhood. My instincts are telling me not to, but I stick my head out to look down to where I could possibly drop to. My window's closed. I never felt myself move, but my window's closed. Even the fucking plastic blind is back in place. I'm sat on the floor now, as far away from the window and door as I can get. I feel sick. Mom came back, along with her work friend. He helped her unscrew the hinges and remove the door. I'm not in there. They can't see me. My mom sent a photo of her inside the bathroom with no me. She thinks this has all been a joke and is refusing to reply to my texts or answer my calls. I'm on 14% battery. I don't know if I will ever get to leave. This might be my only chance to say goodbye to my mom, but she won't answer her phone. Edit. I've ripped down the shower curtain, and yet I'm staring at it right now, hung up, hanging over the side of my bath. I looked out the window again. I think I heard a rumbling. Low, quiet rumbling. I haven't opened the window since. My phone's on 1%. If I get out, I will update this post. If no edit comes, assume I'm still here. I found my dad's memoirs. It seems he wasn't the man I thought he was. My dad has always been loving and caring for his entire life. He's looked after me, raised me, and quite frankly spoiled me since I was a little girl. I always remember the times he comforted me when I was scared and cuddled me when I was sad. I told him over and over again, "You're the best daddy in the world." Embarrassingly, I even used to say it when I was a teenager. My brother went missing when I was young, and it seems like dad poured all of his love into me as a way to compensate. My dad had a stroke last week. I got the call from my mom, who was short and sharp as usual, calling me to the hospital. I went and held my dad's hand whilst he looked at me, frozen in the terrified expression he'd had when the stroke hit him. I cried over him for what seemed like a whole day. I decided the next day to pull myself together. I told Dad I was going to go and get him some more clothes and personal effects to hopefully help his recovery. I swear I saw his heart rate spike on the monitor as I walked out, but maybe I'm just remembering it wrong in light of what I know now. I got to the house and made my way up to Dad's room. I gathered some shirts, some comfortable sweatpants, and opened his drawer to get some personal effects. I was shocked to find a tightly bound set of pages, which seemed to be handwritten. The first page read, How to Be a Good Dad, A Guide to Love and Discipline by Andrew Bauer. Dad had written a book about parenting. I flicked through it and stopped on a page and began to read. Behave or a monster will come and get you. That was the line my wife Lucy always used to scare my daughter Sarah. Sarah was a sweet girl, only 8, and it worked on her every time. Playing too loudly in the garden. A monster will come and get you. Not eating all of her peas at dinner. A monster will come and get you. Not tidying her room. A monster? Yeah, you get the point. Until she started seeing an actual monster, that is. It was a boring midweek evening and I was watching TV with a beer when Sarah came up to me and snuggled alongside me. I wrapped my arm around her and kissed the top of her head. She turned to me and nervously said, Daddy, can I ask you something? I smiled at her and replied, Yes, of course, sweetie, what's up? She paused, looking around with innocent wide eyes, and then turned her attention back to me. Are monsters real? I laughed, bringing the attention of Lucy from the other room. She walked in holding a glass of water and joined in the conversation. What's so funny? She asked, sitting down on the chair next to the sofa me and Sarah were sat on. Sarah wants to know if monsters are real, I said, smiling. Lucy laughed too. We assured our little girl that monsters aren't real and that there was nothing to be scared of. Sarah looked at both of us and swallowed hard. She wanted to ask something else, I could tell. I snuggled her a little closer to me and gave her an encouraging squeeze on her arm. What if a monster comes and gets me like the one that took Michael? She said, her childish voice trembling. Lucy's grip on her glass of water turned so tight her knuckles started to whiten, and I gritted my teeth hard. We didn't talk about Michael. He was, whatever the fuck you want to say, our son. He went missing about a year ago, and since then Lucy can't even bear to hear his name. Sarah had long learned better than to talk about him lest she upset her mother, and I just tried not to think about it altogether. The police had searched for weeks. We'd all been out searching the neighborhood, and found the square root of nothing. No clues, no leads, just an emptiness in a room where Michael should have been. The police suspected a runaway. After all, Michael was 16, and that brought along the usual teen attitude and drama that you'd expect. But running away wasn't Michael. He was too proud and sure of himself to run away from anything. A kidnapping was another possibility, but again, whoever did that would have a fight on their hands. It was a mystery unsolved, an endless question mark in all of our lives, and something which just didn't get talked about. A monster didn't take Michael, because monsters don't exist, shouted Lucy, her grip now perilously close to shattering the glass of water she held. Sarah began to cry and clutched me tightly. I hugged her and reassured her that Mama was sorry, that she didn't mean to shout, and gave Lucy a warning look. She sighed and got up, muttering, I'm going to bed. I suggested that Sarah and I do the same, and did the usual routine of tucking her in and reading her a story before joining Lucy in bed. The next day at breakfast, Sarah looked nervous. I was reading a book and sipping coffee when she suddenly blurted out, There was a monster at the window last night. Me and Lucy exchanged glances before reassuring Sarah yet again that monsters weren't real. She didn't let the bland reassurances of the previous night slide as easily this time, however, and continued on. No, I promise, it was there, it was saying my name. She wailed, beginning to cry. I put down my book and walked over to her. Sarah, honey, monsters aren't real. You were probably just dreaming, I said calmly, putting my hand on her shoulder and giving her a little squeeze. Now come on, Daddy will take you to school. We drove to school in silence, Sarah still trying to suppress sniffles. She didn't even say goodbye as she got out of the car. When I arrived back at the house, Lucy was waiting for me. What are we going to do about this? She snapped frantically, looking at me with intense eyes. I sighed. I knew what she meant. Sarah couldn't believe in monsters. She was way too old, and besides, she had a nervous disposition as it was since her older brother had vanished. I needed to ensure she didn't bring this up again. I walked across the garden slowly. I approached the shed and unlocked the door. The shed was a big wooden structure made out of thick planks of wood and had come with the house. I'd modified it to ensure it locked properly and didn't leak, but there was very little that needed doing to it. The previous occupants had used it as some sort of band practice room, so it was soundproofed and large. I opened the door and stepped inside, closing it behind me. There, shackled to a post at the far end of the shed, was Sarah's monster. It was dressed in tattered rags, but outside of that had no dignity. Shit streaks ran down its legs, and its skinny frame held up a big, battered head. There was no nose, just 2 large punctures in the center of the face, blood and mucus crusted around the holes. One eye was a blank red pit where an eye should be, and the other eye was bloodshot and hateful. The lips had been cut off so a set of yellow crooked teeth jutted out of the center of the face. It was undeniably a monster, and it eyed me warily as I strode across the shed. Clipping the shackle back into place, I leant down close to the creature and paused, taking in the smell of shit, piss, and sweat from it. I went very close to its ear and whispered angrily, If you ever bother your sister again, I'll come back in here and scoop your other fucking eye out, you little cunt. I stood and walked out, locking the shed behind me as I went. I strode back across the garden and into my house, where Lucy was waiting for me. She gave me a look that was a question, asking if it was sorted. Sarah won't be getting any more late night visits from her monster, don't worry, I said, smiling at my wife. You're the best dad in the world, she whispered, kissing me gently on the lips. I looked up, shocked. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Dad had kept Michael in the shed since I was 7 years old. My hands shook as I continued to turn pages, unable to believe what I was reading. Mom and Dad were monsters. They were evil. I stood up quickly, my mind racing. I had to get out to the shed. I had to see Michael. If he was still alive, I had to. The door downstairs opened. Sarah, are you here? Shouted my mum. I stayed silent, moving very slowly as to not creak the floorboards, my skin on end with terror. You didn't read your dad's book, did you? I paused, wondering about the oddness of this situation. The first thing that scared me was how my mom had jumped to that assumption straight away. It was almost like she knew. Impossible, I told myself. The second thing that scared me was how there was no fear, no anxiety in her voice. She wasn't concerned about me finding out. She just wanted to know whether I knew or not. Why? So she can do to you what she did to Michael, said a voice in the back of my head. I shook with fear, still in my parents' bedroom. I was still making my mind up as to what to do when a shout from downstairs interrupted my thoughts. Sarah, shouted Mom. Mind made up, I sneaked across the room into my parents' en-suite as quietly as I could and pressed the flush button on the toilet. I walked purposefully across the room, trying to be heard, and quickly placed the book back in the drawer and closed it. I heard footsteps on the stairs and pulled out the drawer under the bed, which is where I'd previously seen my dad putting his underwear. I made a show of taking some out as my mom marched into the room, purposefully and angrily. "Oh hi Mom," I said, trying to be as nonchalant as possible. She eyed me suspiciously. We'd never had the best relationship in the world and I didn't usually greet her so cheerfully. I cursed myself internally as I pressed on. "Were you shouting me?" I was on the loo. "Yes, I was. I wanted to see if you'd been snooping in things you shouldn't have been," she said tersely, looking past me to the bedside drawer where I'd found the book. I adopted my best innocent expression as I looked at her. "No Mom, I've just been packing some things for Daddy," I said, indicating the duffel bag on the floor behind me. She winced. I knew it made her uncomfortable when I called him Daddy, and I'd done it deliberately. It was taking every shred of effort to hold myself together, to stay strong and put up a front, but I knew I had to. I didn't know what Mom and Dad were capable of and didn't particularly want to find out. The book indicated they'd horribly tortured Michael, and I knew that if they were willing to do that, to brave the investigation of a disappearance, then there wasn't much they weren't willing to do. I looked at Mom again and said, "Shall I make us some coffee?" She looked around the room as if searching for anything else that might be out of place, and then looked back at me. Her expression softened slightly and she said, "That'd be great, thanks." I made my way downstairs, leaving her in the bedroom. I clicked the kettle on and went through the motions of starting to make a coffee when an idea struck me. I pulled out my phone and started texting my best friend, Tori. Tori was reliable, loyal, and could be relied upon to help without question. I trusted her with my life, and with what I'd found out about my parents, it seemed that might become a literal phrase rather than a figurative one. "Tors, I need her help ASAP. Emergency." Tori came back straight away, as I knew she would as soon as she saw the word emergency. "What do you need, babe?" "I need you to call my parents' house and ask for Lucy Bauer. Say Andrew started talking, asking for her. Say you're a nurse from the Royal Hospital Stroke Ward. Sending you the contact now." Tori had never met my parents. We were friends through work, and up until this moment I tried to keep my family life reasonably private. "Babe, WTF," came the text back. "Please, can't tell you how important this is." I looked at Tori's speech bubble, write, and then stop. Start writing again, and then stop. 10 seconds later, the house phone began to ring. It rang 3 times before I heard my mom's voice from upstairs. I could hear the dull murmur of a conversation, then I heard brisk footsteps coming down the stairs. My mom walked purposefully into the kitchen. "Sarah, I need to go to the hospital. Your father started talking," she said, pulling her car keys out of her coat pocket. "Oh my God, that's amazing." I gushed, hoping my acting was good enough to be believable. "Yep, well, just stay here for now, and I'll call when I know more," said Mom as she bustled out. I listened very carefully for the sound of the car starting and pulling out of the long driveway, and then sprang into action. Firing off a quick "you're the best" text to Tori, I unlocked the patio doors and ran outside to the shed. There was a big padlock on it, but I knew how to deal with that. I took out one of my hairpins and inserted it into the lock. This was a trick an ex-boyfriend had taught me, but it was having a hugely practical use here. The padlock clicked and fell open. I hurriedly pulled open the shed. The smell hit me first. Feces, urine, sweat, and bile. I closed my mouth to avoid getting the taste in the back of my throat. I then saw what was chained to the back of the shed. A skeletal, ravaged husk of a human being lay shivering on the floor. Michael was still alive, barely. Sinewy arms and brittle-looking legs, he was completely hairless and completely bereft. His ruined eyeball, which had been written about in Dad's book, had clearly become infected at some point and was a large open, weeping sore. His nose holes were crusted with mucus and filth, and his exposed teeth were cracked, yellow, and inconsistent, black gaps denoting where some had disappeared over the years. He looked at me, his one remaining eye widening as I approached. "SSS Sarah," he hissed out, his removed lips making coherent speech impossible. I burst into tears. "Mikey, what have they done to you?" I wailed as I fumbled trying to pull at his chains. I realized there'd be a key somewhere, and I needed to find it. I could start by getting the book, finding the key, and then getting Mikey and myself out of here and straight to the nearest police station. I whispered to my brother, who had tears leaking out of his eye, that I was going to be right back, and burst back into the house, taking the stairs 2 at a time up to my parents' bedroom. It was then I stopped dead still, in shock, as terror gripped me firmly by the scruff of the neck. I saw what I'd failed to see the first time I came into the bedroom. A little security camera, set up in the corner of the room, pointing directly at the bed. I pulled open the bedside drawer and found that the book had gone. My phone began to ring. I pulled it out. It was Mom. I answered. "Smile for the camera, Sarah," she said poisonously. "You won't get away with this, you evil bitch," I spat back, all pretenses dropped and my fight instinct kicking in. "I already have, you dumb little cunt," she laughed, her emotionless chuckle sending shivers up my spine. "I'll be back home very soon, and as I'm sure you won't leave without dear Michael, good luck trying to free him before I get back. I'll call the police. I'll have killed you both before they get anywhere near. You think me and your father weren't prepared for this? The only reason you didn't end up like Michael was because of him. You should be thankful to him. Fuck you. Come and say that to my face then, princess." The line cut off. I heard a sharp screech as a car pulled up outside. I looked through the window as Mom stepped out, holding a knife. "I work security at Disney World, but quit after something terrifying happened. I work in security at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I work as obviously there are some pretty strict rules about things employees can put online, but I just don't think I can tell this properly without that context. And, honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I just can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20 years I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there'd be a fight to break up, but people usually kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting too much for me the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere with AC, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. While the working conditions were 110% better as far as climate and comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestics. I guess the expensive and stress of vacation got to a lot of people, and I'd be called by neighboring rooms because some mom and dad were yelling at each other. I'd try to suggest they take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I've got to get this out while I have time. 3 days ago I got a call from management. Apparently a couple of days before that, housekeeping had went into a room that should have been turned over that day, and all of the guests' items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on, but during the next 2 days when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out, and sure enough there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything a family would need for vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family: dad, mom, 2 little kids. I tried to call the phone numbers they had given, but all I got was voicemail. We were a bit stumped, so I made the call that housekeeper could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all of their stuff. I found that the family had paid a parking fee and their vehicle description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots and I had easily located their vehicle, so that ruled out a car accident or them deciding to just leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all of their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day they arrived, they got here late and probably just stayed on the resort. The next day they used 2 credits at Epcot. The second park day they used just 1 credit at Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now at Disney we have something called magic bands. Magic bands are worn by the guests and act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, fast pass, and more. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day they went to Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride, It's a Small World, around 11 a.m. then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring in someone else on this. I called an old co-worker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they wrote it, and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught looking. He showed me what he found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where rides load and unload. The footage showed them scanning their bands to use fast passes for the ride and boarding the ride. The footage from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in their car exiting. They weren't there. Of course, we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and mom and dad and the other kid got off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or killed or stuck in machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride. Middle of the damn day. Turned off that earworm music and turned up the lights. Me and my buddy walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually there was close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was right stumped. I've kept digging the past couple of days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found next to. I've called the police and I suppose they're on the way, but the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of warning. I kept digging into their reservation over the last couple of days, and today I noticed they had purchased Memory Maker. There are photographers all over the parks and cameras in a lot of the rides, and with Memory Maker, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to a guest's Disney account when the system knows their picture has been taken. And the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the magic bands. Well, I opened up their Memory Maker photo album, and I swear, there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so are pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides in front of the castle. But the rest are all in It's a Small World. The rides only take 1 picture per go-around. So it appears as though this family has ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this little family, and they look so darn confused. The next 10 minutes 15 I can see dad getting angry, yelling. Mom is holding on to those 2 kids like her life depends on it, and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying. And it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so it looks like they're trying to get out. In one the dad is missing. In another they're all gone. Maybe like they've bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out. But in the very next one, they're all right back in that damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mom and kids. It's just when I look closely I can see dad, maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just mom and 1 kid. Another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think them 2 are still alive, just damn near catatonic. Looking straight ahead, pale. And, y'all, I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures I can tell they aren't where they should be. I even saw one with a doll in the car with this family. I can't look anymore or I'm going to lose my lunch. I closed the album. Its file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added? I see on security cameras that the local PD just arrived, so they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what the fuck is going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed in my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I think I'm going to walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover-up as to why a whole family vanished. They didn't vanish. I know where they are. When it's after midnight, we aren't allowed to go downstairs alone. The town I live in is nice enough. It's quiet, a little quaint. My dream is to move to the city once I graduate from college. I want a life where things are busier, more exciting, more alive. I live at home with my parents and my twin sister. Both of my parents are underpaid teachers, so our upbringing has been relatively modest. We've never been spoiled. We've always been told to work hard for every dollar, and gratitude for everything we have has been instilled in us since childhood. My parents must have worked really hard to save money throughout these years, because the house that we've lived in since I was a teen is pretty darn huge. Our tiny little town in general is relatively prestigious, so I do my part to extract wisdom from my parents whenever possible. Clearly, they know a thing or two about how to win at life. Of all of the things my parents ask of me and my sister, the rule they are the most stern about is, if you're going downstairs after midnight, you have to bring someone with you. Ever since we first moved to this house, they would remind us of this rule every chance they got. They'd randomly bring it up at the dinner table or before we'd go off to school. Sometimes, if they heard footsteps in the hallway at night, one of them would get up from bed and walk with us to wherever in the house we were going. The strangest thing about it was that me and my sister never really had any reason to go downstairs at night anyways. Our rooms, the living room, the kitchen, and pretty much everything else we used was upstairs. Sure, downstairs had a games room and some stuff we maybe needed to pull out from storage from time to time, but overall, I couldn't really think of a scenario where we'd need to go downstairs after midnight. My sister and I would ask my parents about it sometimes. Why do we have this rule? What happens if we break it? They would usually deflect, change the subject, or say, we'll tell you when you're older, dear. As I got older and older, the fact that my whole family slept upstairs became increasingly weird to me. I was curious about what exactly was going on. So, fresh off my 20th birthday, I decided to conjure up a situation where I'd absolutely need to head downstairs after 12 a.m. Mom, I left my laptop in the games room and I need to polish up a paper that I'm submitting tomorrow. Lame excuse, I know. She was skeptical and pushed back a little bit. Can I get up early tomorrow and finish up the essay in the morning? Why did I leave this assignment until the last minute? I was able to assuage these questions pretty easily. I thought it was due 2 days from now. I thought my laptop was in my room. I'm a little bit stressed and I won't be able to sleep if I don't finish it, etc., etc. So she ultimately obliged. We made our way down the small staircase and arrived at the door leading to the downstairs area. Before my mother opened it, she turned to me. Okay, he's likely going to latch onto me. Make sure I don't open the door to the backyard, okay? Make sure I'm with you at all times. You can pull me if you need to. I thought she was kidding. She opened the door. Our downstairs area has another small living room, a small kitchen, and a hallway that leads to our games room and our storage area. I'd accidentally left my laptop in the games room, so as we entered, I immediately turned towards the hallway. I thought my mom would follow me. Instead, I saw her, just standing there, shivering, jittery. Her gaze was fixed on the window in the kitchen. It's a big window, with the blinds usually pulled up. The window was a peek into our large, mostly empty backyard. I looked at my mom confusedly as she continued her uninterrupted stare. Slowly, she started walking to the door to our backyard. Mom, what are you? That's when I saw him, pressed against the window from the outside. His face was obscured by the darkness, but I could see his eyes. Wide open, wider than eyes should go. Otherworldly. He looked focused, excited. My mom continued walking to the door. I grabbed her as hard as I could and pulled her away, back to the staircase leading upstairs. I closed the door behind us. It took my mom a moment to snap out of it. She spent another minute staring at the door to the downstairs area, meekly trying to open it and go back to where she was previously walking to. When she finally pulled herself together. What the fuck was that? Did you get your laptop, hun? Mom, what the fuck was that outside the window? Mom's reaction was weird. A mix of annoyance, concern, and fear. She finally responded. Terrible things happen when we talk about him too much. As long as we go downstairs in pairs of two, we're always okay. No one's let him in yet. And that was that. I continued asking her as we made our way upstairs, but she just flat out ignored me at this point. I had no idea what to do. I wanted to tell my sister, but part of me thought that it would only freak the hell out of her and achieve nothing. I tried bugging my dad about it, but he also deflected. At most, sometimes he'd say something like, we just wanted to make sure we could give you and your sister a comfortable upbringing, and then walk away. What the fuck? It's been 2 years since me and my mom went downstairs together after midnight. Since then, we've continued to follow the rule, and we'd thankfully never run into any problems. I've tried to convince my parents that we should think about downsizing and moving somewhere else, but they'd always say stuff like, that isn't how this works, dear, and as long as we play it safe after midnight, we'll be okay. That brings me to why I'm writing this today. My parents have been gone for the week, visiting family in another state. My sister left earlier this evening to go to a sleepover with her best friend. I'm home alone, for the first time in forever. I don't usually have my phone on me. It takes me a couple of hours, at least, to read and respond to text messages. I've always been lazy about it. I recently took a look at my phone to see a missed text message from my sister. Hey, I might have accidentally left the downstairs door open. Just an FYI, please close it whenever you get a sec. She sent this text message 4 hours ago. I read it at 10 minutes past midnight. I'm writing this from the closet in my room. So far, I think I'm okay. Maybe she's misremembering and she kept the door shut. The only thing I'm worried about is that I'm starting to shiver a little bit, and I have this inexplicable urge to get out from my hiding spot so that he can find me. My daughter, who went missing 3 years ago, just showed up on my doorstep. My wife and I had just sat down to dinner when we were interrupted first by the sound of the front doorknob twisting, then by 3 loud knocks. I stood up from the table and went to the front door, wondering who would have tried the knob first before knocking. My brother maybe, but it was a little late for a visit from him on a weeknight. The sound of the rainstorm outside grew as I opened the door. When I saw her standing on the porch, covered in rain and mud, my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. "Hi, Daddy," Sarah said. The way her eyes and nose were scrunched up told me she was crying, even though the rain washed away her tears the second they fell from her eyes. "Can I come inside? It's so cold." I heard something glass shatter in the kitchen, then rushed footsteps. I grabbed my daughter in a tight embrace and began to sob. "Oh my God, you're home?" I said. 3 years ago we had reported our daughter missing. We told the police that we had put her to bed one night, and the next morning she was gone. The police found that her bedroom window showed evidence of having been pried open. My wife, Hannah, and I hadn't heard anything that night, and the neighbors all agreed that they hadn't either. What happened next was the largest search party in our small town's history. It's not often 13-year-old girls go missing, especially under such terrible and mysterious circumstances. But despite everyone's best efforts and news reports throughout the state and neighboring states, there was no trace to be found of our little girl. I picked her up and carried her into the house while she sobbed into my neck. I heard my wife turn the corner, let out a small scream, then run to join us in our first complete family hug in 3 years. "What happened?" Hannah asked. "Did anyone follow you here?" "No," Sarah said through her sobs. "I don't know what happened. I just woke up in the dark and started trying to find my way home. I don't know where I was, somewhere in the desert I think, and I just started walking." I set her down and looked at her again. Her hair was long. It probably hadn't been cut since the night we lost her, and the clothes she wore looked like they had been given to her by a homeless person. "Let's get you a hot shower," my wife said. "Are you hungry?" Sarah sniffed and nodded. "Can I have a peanut butter sandwich?" "Anything," my wife said, now choking back tears of her own. "I can't believe you're back." We dressed her in some of Hannah's old clothes, which were still a little large for Sarah. I promised to go to the store first thing in the morning to buy a whole new wardrobe. The rest of the evening was spent with tears and laughter. Hannah and I couldn't believe she was back, and with no recollection of the time between the night she disappeared and when she woke up. Perhaps that much was for the best. After Sarah was asleep, we put her in the office with an air mattress and promises of a new mattress along with her new clothes. I sat outside on the patio with a glass of bourbon in one hand and a cigarette in the other. My wife came outside and softly closed the door behind her. We sat in silence for a moment, then she finally spoke. "What the hell do we do?" Her voice was low and shaky. I shook my head slowly and took a long drag from my cigarette. "I have no idea. Thank God she doesn't remember anything," Hannah said, taking a sip of the wine she'd brought with her. "You don't think she knows, do you?" "SHHHH," I said sharply, trying to keep my emotions level, which was difficult because I was on the brink of panic myself. "We shouldn't talk about it." She took a sip of her wine and lowered her voice even more so it was just barely above the sound of crickets chirping in the grass. "You don't think she can hear us, do you?" "I don't think so," I answered slowly. But I didn't think a lot of things before, and look at what happened. We sat again in silence for a long while, both reflecting on the night she disappeared and the lies we'd told to every police officer and news reporter that came our way. Keeping the lie straight had taken months of practice, but somehow we'd pulled it off. But that wasn't even the hard part. The hard part was keeping the whole plan away from Sarah. The year or so we'd spent planning the whole thing in secret, talking to the neighbors to get their cooperation, all while doing our best to keep the life-changing event as far out of our minds as possible. "She's bound to find out what we did," Hannah said. "We're not so good at keeping things away from her as we used to be. It's just like riding a bike," I said, hoping more than anything I was right. The fact of the matter was that, 3 years ago, Hannah and I had committed the unforgivable act of filicide. We'd killed our own daughter, the very one that was now 3 years older and slept on an air mattress inside. If that wasn't bad enough, shortly after doing so, for good measure, we had moved across town to get a fresh start in, although we never said it out loud, even to each other, because we were still terrified even though she was gone. We were careful not to list our address on anything, no yellow pages, no direct mailing, nothing. And yet, Sarah still managed to find us. We hadn't wanted to do it. We spent years convincing ourselves that we were in control, that it was just a matter of good parenting. After what happened to the Jarvis boy though, we knew that for the sake of ourselves and everyone around us there was only one thing to do. I took another drag from my cigarette. I hadn't realized until that moment that my hand was shaking, and stared out at the night sky, trying not to think about everything that led up to that night, but being able to think of nothing else. "Mommy, I remember the day she painted all the mirrors black. She sat in the kitchen, her chair leaning, poised to topple, one bare foot propped up on the table where I ate, and she drank orange juice that smelled like hospital exam rooms. She smiled, so I smiled. She colored her toenails black with a marker and I marveled at the steadiness of her hands. When she finished, she asked me how they looked. Good, Mommy, still smiling, but not smiling right. I remember the pride hanging on her face, caught in a timeless moment of flight before free fall. The memory is one of dread, my pretty mother, happy and then shattered into manic rage by something I didn't understand. She painted the mirrors with the marker first, then with paint, then with blood. She used a shard of silvered glass to cut her face. So ugly, but she'd always been pretty to me. I remember the way she looked at pill bottles, each tablet heavy in her eyes like bullets awaiting the comfort of an empty gun. I remember Bruce, her boyfriend who wasn't daddy, a man she called nice even when he wasn't nice to me. She'd pass out on the sofa. His face would creep into the space between the frame and my bedroom door. He smiled, so I winced and pretended to sleep. I remember when she burned our clothes in the backyard atop a pyre of furniture. She said they were infested. Spiders I'd never felt, but she scratched her skin bloody all the same. I remember when adventuring became a crime. She drank her juice and drove so fast it felt like we might outrun the thing that made her weep. We'd stopped at a neighbor's house, went inside even though they weren't home. The police that came weren't as nice as the ones on TV. One might have smiled, but Mommy screamed and clawed, and that's the part that stuck. I remember Mommy after, limp as sodden bed linens. She'd stopped smiling around the time that the lady with the clipboard became Mommy's friend. She watched me play, but she never played herself. She scribbled. She frowned, so I watched Mommy, melting. Pretty inside still, I reckoned. I remember the day she said she could fly. She smiled wide enough for the both of us. I know, but the pills are poison, honey. I'm better now. Stay here and watch how good I've gotten. I waited on the sidewalk. She disappeared into our apartment building. When she emerged, she looked so small, 9 stories up, smiling from the roof like some midday crescent moon. I won't be gone too long. One step, graceful, arms spread wide, and then I remember wondering that day if everyone's skulls were full of spiders like hers. They poured out, skittering, thousands. Now I'm 29. I don't remember when the crawling in my head began, but I remember Mommy's smile. I wonder if my daughter will remember mine. The previous tenant of my new flat left a survival guide. I'm not sure I want to live here anymore. I moved in with my boyfriend yesterday. We've been together for 5 years now and we're old and wise enough to settle down and finally leave our parents' houses. He just turned 24 and I'm 22. He's the love of my life. His name is Jamie and I couldn't be happier to be living with him. When we decided to make the leap, we spent 2 months looking at flats and houses. We couldn't afford to buy yet, so renting was our only option, but the prices were astronomical. For our budget, we would have been lucky to get a box room and a stove. Jamie works for a local 24-hour fast food restaurant and I'm training to be a teacher. The early stages of training don't pay much and I owe a lot in student loans, so finances are tough. We had almost given up hope until we found our flat. It was nothing special, but to us it was a palace. A spacious 2-bedroom apartment with views of a city park, a balcony, and local conveniences. It was in a tower block in a not-so-nice area, but neither of us had been wealthy growing up. We weren't fussy, just grateful to be together. The advert was sweetened by the deposit-free option and open-ended tenancy. The landlord was happy to sign a 5-year contract if we wanted. That sort of thing never happens in the city. We were told that along with no deposit we would also have no inspections, but would be liable to pay for any damage when we ended the tenancy. I'd never heard of anything quite like it. We knew that for our budget and location we weren't going to get any better. We snapped the place up fast, not even bothering to view it. It felt like our only chance. Move-in day rolled around quickly and yesterday we got the keys to our first home together. It was such a strange feeling. The day was chaos, getting our stuff in and up in the lift. We were flat number 42, on the 7th floor. The items we couldn't get in the lift had to be taken up all the stairs by the removal men. I think they were grateful we weren't any higher, but I still wish we had been able to give them a better tip. In the evening we settled down on our second-hand sofa, given to us by a cousin of a friend, and watched some TV. We smoked cigarettes on the balcony looking at the park and fell asleep on our mattress on the floor super early because we had no energy to put the bed together yet and Jamie had work at a hideous time of the morning. We slept soundly last night. I felt safe and happy. I don't think that feeling is coming back anytime soon, and it's all due to the note I found this morning. I found it in the kitchen, having a coffee, hours after Jamie had left for his early shift at work. It was in one of the cupboards that were fixed to the wall. There were a bunch of useful items from the previous tenant. Spare keys to the flat, a set of tiny keys that locked and unlocked the windows, spare smoke alarm batteries, and a folded-up piece of paper. The note was handwritten with new occupier of flat 42 in beautiful cursive on the blank side. I opened it up and sat down to read. I can't really describe it to you, so I'm going to copy it out below. Dear new occupier, firstly, welcome to your new home. I lived here before you for 35 years with my husband. Unfortunately, he had an incident at home recently that I'd rather not discuss that claimed his life. My sister has now decided I can't keep up with the demands of the property and has insisted that I move in with her and her husband. I was reluctant at first, but the stairs do kill me at my age, and without Bernie it's filled with sadness. Anyway, when you've lived somewhere for as long as I have, it feels like a person that you know. You understand its personality and what makes it tick. I thought it was probably pertinent that I impart some of that knowledge on you. It's a wonderful home, honestly. I have lived through best and worst years, and leaving it behind is very emotional, but if you are to survive and get the best out of it, then there are some steps you need to follow. 1. The landlord will never bother you, he doesn't visit, call or communicate in any way. But make sure to pay your rent in a timely fashion always. I have only dealt with him once in 35 years and let's just say I never missed another rent day. Any repairs required, you speak to the agent you rented the place with. 2. Do not use the communal lift between 1:11 and 3:33 a.m. Just don't do it. This step is vital if you are to have a happy life here. It really is life or death. Don't do it. This has cost me and many others in the building greatly, and I would rather not elaborate on why you shouldn't do this. Just please don't do it. I cannot stress this enough. 3. When you hear the strange animal noises coming from flat 48, don't question it. Mr. Prentice lives there and he's a lovely chap. Don't be afraid to say hello to him in the corridor or on the stairs, but whatever you do, don't check on him when you hear the noises. You'll know when you hear them. 4. If you ever come across a window cleaner on the balcony, ignore him. He may seem like the nicest fellow you've ever had trying to sell you something at the door, but it really is best that you don't engage. He will go away if you ignore him, but he tries pretty hard the first few times, so you'll need some resilience. Whatever you do, don't offer him anything. No money, no hot drink. 5. Don't leave food scraps out. Bin or refrigerate them immediately. If you have small animals, it is imperative that you watch them eat and take away any leftover food immediately after they are done. This and Rule 2 go hand in hand. The things forage all day and seem to really love animal feed. You don't want them in your flat, I promise. You can leave what you want out between 1:11 and 3:33 a.m., so you may want to feed your pets then. 6. Don't communicate with any neighbors who claim to come from flats 65-72. These flats suffered a fire in the late 80s that devastated the whole floor. All the residents died in their homes. The building was mostly council-owned at the time, and they never bothered to renovate the flats. They've been empty ever since, but every now and again someone will knock at your door claiming to live in one of these flats and ask to borrow some sugar. They will seem entirely average, but you must shut and lock the door immediately. I installed 2 extra security bolts to avoid these fuckers. I don't like to swear at my age, but they really are fuckers. 7. Simple one for you here, keep a weapon in each room. Sometimes you follow all these steps and something still slips through the net. Better to be safe than sorry. 8. The building has a committee that will try and get you to join. It's one of those neighbors groups about improving living conditions for all residents. It's a nice group, and the lady who runs it, Terry from flat 26, is a fantastic neighbor. By all means get involved, but I wouldn't recommend babysitting Terry's 2 children. She'll ask you, because the poor woman needs a break, but if you accept, don't say I didn't warn you. 9. Stray hairless cats sometimes roam in the hallway. I know they're supposedly a special, expensive breed, but they don't belong to anyone. They're mostly harmless, but don't pick them up. Not unless you see one of those neighbors that claims to live in 65-72. Then grab the cat and lock it inside with you. It'll burn your skin a little, but the cats are friendly and I wouldn't want to see them hurt. 10. There is no way to fix the damp patch on the ceiling in the bedroom. Sometimes it will turn a deep crimson and look quite concerning, but please try not to be alarmed. It doesn't drip, it doesn't get any bigger, and it's been there longer than I have. The landlord won't budge on it, according to the agents. I flagged it many times, even called the police the first night it changed color, but it was a waste of time, and it will be for you too. It's best to ignore it. 11. You can trust the postman. His name is Ian Flanders, and he's been the postman since before I moved in. He has his own key to the main door and delivers post to the door every morning at 8:54. I can't include everything here, or it would become a novel, but if you have any questions, Ian will help you. 12. Finally, the first few weeks are the worst. You'll feel like you've made a mistake. I'm sure reading this you already do, but if you can get through the first few weeks, it really is a lovely block to live in. Every property has its quirks, and this one is a little extra special, but you can be truly happy here if you just take my advice. I wish you all the best, I really do. Yours truly, Mrs. Prudence Hemmings. I don't really know what to think after reading the note. Hopefully it was some sort of joke, but the agent had said the previous tenant was an elderly lady, and I can't see anyone named Prudence Hemmings attempting to play practical jokes on someone they'd never met. There were also parts of the note I couldn't disprove. There was indeed a large damp patch above the bed that me and Jamie had already discussed reporting. No crimson, but it definitely existed. I had also commented on a beautiful Sphinx cat roaming the halls as we were moving in. I started to get seriously freaked out. Our dream, our beautiful little home, had just become a source of fear and confusion. I checked the time and it was 9:14. Damn it, out of time to catch postman Ian. When I opened the door to check, sure enough, 2 letters addressed to a Mrs. Hemmings sat on the doorstep. At about 11:15, my worst fears were truly confirmed when a friendly middle-aged looking man carrying window cleaning equipment knocked on my balcony door. I ignored him. I didn't want to take the risk until I'd spoken to Jamie and showed him the note. I'd texted him all ready to rush home. I felt bad as the man rapped his knuckles against the door for over 10 minutes, but honestly the longer it went on the more I was terrified. My windows were sparkling, and due to our lack of curtains I couldn't even hide from his gaze. I felt so exposed. He stayed for a total of 30 minutes exactly, and never once did he stop looking at me or knocking. He shouted the occasional ultra-friendly line or humble request for a beverage in the heat through the door, but I did my best to avoid eye contact. When he finally left, I looked outside every window in the flat, but I couldn't see him on any of the other balconies or see any equipment suggesting he was around. He had vanished completely. Jamie still hadn't texted me back. He must have been having a rough shift. It was a Friday and they were always busy. It wasn't often that he didn't reply. He was due home in around an hour anyway. I read the note probably hundreds of times over. I tortured myself reading it for the next hour, desperately waiting for Jamie to come through the door to tell me it was all crazy and I should relax. I hoped for that so much, but Jamie never came. His shift should have finished around midday, but by 2 p.m. he still wasn't home. I panicked, I cried, I left over 100 voice messages on his phone but got nowhere. I finally decided it had been long enough that calling his work wouldn't embarrass him, and his boss told me that he had never turned up for his shift. I thought about it, what could have happened? And then it hit me. Jamie's shift started at 4 a.m. today. He would have left the flat at 3:15 and taken the lift down the stairs. I don't know what to do. I've tried to convince myself it was all just a big joke. Maybe Jamie wrote the note and got his boss in on it. A voice in my head kept telling me that he couldn't write like that if he tried, but I had to attempt to fool myself. It's getting late and he still isn't home. What if it's all true? I think we made a big mistake.